An esteemed professor turns Vijay's sense of self upside down. Please welcome Vijay Mehrotra with his story, Bottom of the Class.
32 years ago, this fall, I was getting my grades from my first quarter in my PhD program in applied mathematics at Stanford. I'd been a really, really good student in college, but this particular quarter, I was dismayed to see that I got 3 Bs. Doesn't sound so bad, but consider the following. As a college student, I'd gotten 2 Bs the entire time, and a B is pretty much the worst grade that you can get as a PhD student in any class. The next quarter, I got a C+. And I was really struggling to survive in the program through the first year. I was near the bottom of the class, and then during the fall of my second year, the guy underneath me quit. So I then was officially at the bottom of the class. And the thing is, things were way, way worse than that. I weighed 30 pounds more than I do now. I hadn't been on a single date. Now, it's important to qualify that by saying I was in engineering school. And the few women friends I had in engineering school would tell me that they had an expression about the guys, that the odds were good for the ladies, but the goods were odd. And I can assure you that I was a very odd good or an odd bad. I was absolutely at my wit's end. And this is not for lack of effort. I worked nights and weekends. I was doing everything I could to stay afloat and to survive, but I felt like a complete imposter. The question has to be asked, why didn't you quit? And the obvious answer was this. I come from a family of professors. I have 12 relatives in the United States. 5 of us are professors. And one other guy has got a PhD too, but he works in the tech world. He's a serial entrepreneur, slacker. But I think it was a little deeper than that. I think that I was so beaten down that my ego was hanging by a very, very thin thread. And the idea that I was a quitter and a failure was just not something I was ready for. I've thought about it for a long time, about 31 years. And I think it's clear to me that if I'd been a good graduate student, I would have quit. The fact that I was so bad at it, perversely, had me tied, and I had to figure out how to finish. About 2.5 years in, I had passed all my qualifying exams. I'd taken all of my courses, and there was just one thing left to do. Find a dissertation topic and write a book. Now, there seemed, from what I could see, to be 3 ways to find a dissertation topic. Number 1, be a very organized super genius. I met people like that every day. There was a guy in my class who had finished his dissertation before I'd even finished my classwork. Second approach, more traditional. Find a professor who thinks you're a good student and nudge your way into their research group, and eventually they give you something to work on, and you work on it and you finish. But my self-esteem was so low, and my sense of being part of this community and being part of this institution was so weak that I was convinced that there was no professor in my department that would ever consider taking me on as a graduate student. So that approach was also out. I was left with the third approach, wait for divine intervention. And it happened. One day I was walking across campus and Dr. Jam waved me down. Now, Dr. Jam was a 50-something, fancy-dressing professor of engineering. He was like a nerd's idea of what a cool guy looked like. Now, he'd never given me the time of day before, but on this particular day, he said, "If you got a minute, I want to tell you about this." And I thought, have I got a minute? What else am I doing? And so 5 minutes later, we're up in his office. He's at the whiteboard. He's diagramming some things. He says, you might be just the guy to take this on. He gives me some papers and says, work on it if you want. This was the most encouragement and direction that I'd been given in the entire 3 years I'd been at Stanford. and I ran with it. For the next 4 weeks, I worked night and day on this problem. I scribbled things down, I crumpled them up into paper balls, I threw them, I repeated the process. I woke up in the middle of the night dreaming about this problem and some clever way to solve it. I felt like I was onto something. It was the first time I'd been onto something the entire time I'd been a student. I went back to Dr. Jam's office, and he said, okay, great, show me what you got. And I get to the whiteboard. He's got his hands kind of folded, looking up. And I start to explain the problem. I start to explain the approach to solving the problem. I can tell that he's paying attention. I can tell that he gets it. He asks good questions. And at some point along the way, I might have heard that he thought this was clever. But when we wrapped up, he shut me down, and he shut me down hard. He said, look, I'm not interested in this approach of yours. It doesn't build on any of my theories. It's not going to make me any more famous or powerful. And I'm not really interested in you, so why don't you just get the fuck out there? He didn't actually say that, but that's how it felt. But there I was, out there again, searching for divine intervention. I tried a whole bunch of things for the next year that didn't really go anywhere, but that episode with Dr. Jam, that period in which I had had hope, in which I was engaged, in which I was thinking and developing ideas, which, by the way, is what I thought research was. Not getting somebody to do something you want them to do so you look better. And gradually it came to me that the only way that I was going to find out whether my idea was good enough for a PhD was to go see the legendary Dr. Wow. Dr. Wow was the leading scholar in my subdiscipline and was located at a prestigious research institute in New Jersey. Everybody on the faculty at Stanford worshiped Dr. Wow, and I knew if I could get Dr. Wow on board, I'd have something. So I saw an announcement for a conference in Philadelphia where Dr. Wow was going to be speaking. I bought the cheapest plane ticket I could. I got my friend's mother to put me up in an apartment. And on Monday morning, with my heart pounding, I took to the halls. If any of you have seen Trading Places, it's the day that Valentine and Lewis get together. This is serious. I spent the entire day avoiding Dr. Wow. I went only places I knew he wouldn't go. And when I saw him across the way at the reception, I turned and ran the other way. The next day was Tuesday. My flight was Tuesday night. Dr. Wow was speaking in a session on Tuesday morning. I came in late. I pulled up a seat in the back of the room, and I just waited. I had no idea what they were talking about. I just waited. The session was over, and about 20 people had crowded around the four speakers. Dr. Wow had the biggest crowd, and I was at the back of that crowd. My palms were sweating. And finally, after every other person in front of me had said their piece and shook hands, I approached Dr. Wow. I didn't even introduce myself. I just stammered. I said, do you know if anybody's ever dealing with a fixed population mean method? And he looked down at me, silver-haired genius, and he said, no, but I think it's a damn good idea. And we talk ever so briefly, and he's encouraging, and he's excited. He says, this is great. And he gives me his card and says, keep me posted. I flew home that night on United, but I felt like I didn't need a plane. For the next couple of weeks, I got back hard at work. I tried to organize all of my ideas, talk about next steps, explore all of them. I wrote it all up in this funky digital word processor with math symbols. And at the end of that time, I printed out 15 pages. I put them in an envelope addressed to Dr. Wow in New Jersey. And less than a week later, I got back a letter from Dr. Wow talking about what a great idea this was. So glad I was working on it. Line by line comments on those 15 pages I sent him, which would turn out to be the first chapter of my dissertation. And about a dozen research papers where he just put a post-it on it and said, just read these. That wasn't the end. It took 2 more years of hard work, but at the end of that time, I'd written my dissertation. I defended it against the same professors who I didn't believe would ever work with me. I got it signed off, completed, and now you have to call me doctor. So where was the gift? Was the gift the day that Dr. Wow looked down on me and put his hand upon my forehead and brought my dissertation to life? Now, I've thought about it again for only about 31 years. The gift was not when Dr. Jam kicked me out of his office. The gift was not when Dr. Jam saw me walking across campus. And the gift was not when I got that envelope back in the mail from Dr. Wow with his line-by-line comments and his letter of encouragement to make Pinocchio feel like a real boy. No, the gift was definitely the moment I got on that plane. And the reason that was the gift is that's the gift that Dr. Jam gave me. If I had an idea that I thought was worthwhile, it was worth fighting for. And worth getting it in front of the best people that you could and letting the chips fall. And the gift from Dr. Wow was this simple message. Keep working hard, kid. You're not alone. Thank you.